Welcome, everyone, to the Success Elevated podcast. As always, I'm your host, Hayden Lee, and I am joined by a special co-host this week. He's co-hosted a handful of episodes with me now and is an old vet at this, Mr. Derek Priest, the high priest of marketing here at Spot On Solutions. Thanks again for coming on to join us for an episode this week, Derek.
Love being here. Thanks for inviting me again, Hayden.
Oh, yeah, of course. You are welcome, as always, to come on and chat with me and the cool guest that we have on, and which today is no exception. We have a really, really awesome guest, Marcie Richardson, who's the director of HR for Guarantee Restoration Services, as well as a member of the board of directors for RIA. So, Marcie, thanks for coming on the podcast today. We have a lot we want to talk about, but first and foremost, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Hayden.
Yeah.
And Derek.
And Derek, we can't forget about Derek. And speaking of Derek, if you wouldn't mind, just take a little bit of time here and kind of maybe intro Marcie, but talk about how you first got connected with Marcie and how I know you guys go way back. So maybe enlighten our audience a little bit about who is Marcie and how you guys got connected originally.
Okay. Well, I definitely could come up with some stories on this, but I will tell the edited for podcast version.
There we go.
No, I am super honored to call Marcie my friend. We met, gosh, Marcie, how long ago it's been? It's been like 8 years
5
ago.
years.
At least 5. Okay.
At least 5. Yeah.
At least 5. We were sitting next to each other in a Bioland Executive Summit class. It was a sales class with Jim Ryerson.
Yep.
I was there because, wanted to learn more about sales. I'm not 100% sure why Marcie was there, but we hit it off very quickly, and we had a great time during that class, and we were always the ones that, we were the ones that kept getting in trouble. We had a blast, and from then on, like I said, we see each other now all over the place at different industry events. We have kept in touch. She brings so much knowledge and education to the restoration industry. She's a vital part of the Guaranteed Restoration team. She's just amazing. So I'm super blessed to have ran into her. We didn't get to choose where we sat. They sat our little placemat name tags next to each other, and from there, the rest is history. And
Bioland has never regretted assigned seating ever since they regret ever doing that now, right?
Good old Bioland and Chuck Bioland bringing
it.
people together, man. That's what they do, isn't it? That's great.
Yep.
Thanks, Derek. I know a lot of our audience is going to be familiar with who Marcie is, obviously with her involvement with RIA and everything that goes on with that. But Marcie, if you wouldn't mind as well, Derek kind of talked about how you guys first met, but talk to us a little bit about just, for our audience and for those that are listening, talk a little bit about your background and your career, both with the restoration industry and any kind of professional background that you'd like to give for us.
Yeah. So Derek and I were definitely labeled class clowns. I'll just go ahead and say that. We were the class clowns.
Okay, love it.
But no, I've been in HR for it's 20 years, and it's really it's a gut punch to say anything like that I've done something 20 years now, but it is what it is, right?
Yes.
But I've worked in everything from, I've done offshore, always in HR, offshore HVAC, construction and sales. I've done, also worked on the employee benefits side for a long time. So HR has always been my niche. I've been with Guarantee Restoration now for 5.5 years. So, but I think I found my home, right? Like everybody's always looking for that industry or somewhere that they feel like they belong. And the restoration just fits me. It's my heart, everything that tugs. It's the people, and it's not just one company over another. It's the culture and everything that restoration has together. And so I just absolutely love it here. And so I'm trying to give back as much as restoration has given me in my short time here. And then within Guarantee, we're moving and grooving, and I am just happy to be a part of this ride to see where we continue to go. And it's been an awesome thing. Like I said, restoration for me is it's home sweet home, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, and you mentioned it there, but the people are awesome. I was not as familiar with the restoration industry as a whole before I came and worked at Spot On Solutions, but I did work a couple summers for a friend that owned a restoration company, and yeah, like the people, I think more so than anything else, as I've met more people in the industry, people like Chuck Violand and others, I've just really come to love like this industry. And yeah, the people are awesome. So yeah, I think you're right. I think there is definitely a home here in the restoration cleaning world. It's there's a lot of really, really awesome people. I want to make sure we kind of hit at it before we dive in. There's, like I said at the beginning, there's a lot here that, you know, having a director of HR, we're going to be able to talk about today. And it's all kind of related around this subject that we're really focusing on for the month of May, which is mental health awareness. This is part 3. This is episode 3, whatever you want to call it, of this series that we're doing for Mental Health Awareness Month. We spent the first couple episodes talking with a gentleman by the name of Ashton Holbrook, who's a mental health professional. He's a counselor. He deals with these issues and these struggles that people have on a day-to-day basis. It's what he does professionally. And now what we wanted to do is we wanted to bring on someone like Marcie, that can talk a little bit more in detail how these issues of mental health and the struggles that, you know, like the statistics say, 1 in 5 people have some kind of mental health struggle. So that's a lot of people, 20% of the population, how those struggles fit in with the workplace, and how us as employees, as teammates, you know, Derek as an employer, how can we better help our work environment be a positive space for people that are struggling with mental health, but also how that positive environment fits in with still being productive and increasing, you know, levels of performance. So my first question, Marcie, you know, the common statistic that we see is, 1 in 5 people deal with mental health struggles or mental health, some kind of illness, a mental illness of some kind. Is that as common? That's a stat that we see all over the place, but is it, from your experience, is that as common in the restoration world, or you know, maybe you can just go beyond that? Is it as common as we're being told? Right, 1 in 5 people deal with this. Is this a common issue that you've seen? And what are some of the challenges that you've faced as a director of HR over the last 5 years in the restoration world?
you know, mental illness, there's so many different degrees and levels, right? And I
Yeah,
believe that everybody is walking in and they're struggling with something. You know, there
yeah,
it could be something that's recent, it could be something that's lingering and ongoing. And so it's always being aware and sensitive to what somebody's going through. You know,
yeah,
one
yeah.
of my favorite quotes that in a book, Radical Candor, she states that emotional labor is part of leadership. And what that means is that
Oh,
you
wow.
have to kind of invest. You have to give of yourself to get back from your employees. So, you know, we were talking about, is that something I see on it every day? Sure. There's people that, you know, hey, they're struggling at home, or something's going on with a child, or a sickness. There's going to be that different levels. And I think
Yeah,
the best way that we as employers, as just general people, can help overcome what somebody's going through is you show up as you, right? You
yeah,
be authentic to you. Don't just walk by somebody's desk and say, "Hey, how are you doing?" with no care of what that reply is going to be. Actually pause, listen what they're going to say, and invest a little bit of your time, because that's all they want. So when
yeah,
we're talking about how can we overcome mental illness in the workplace, because a lot of times we're never going to be aware, right? The only time we're aware is if they're telling us that's something, or if we see something and just say, "Hey, can I help you?" Is truly investing in be authentic and showing up as you, and taking 30 seconds to say, "Hey, how are you doing?" and actually care what that answer is back.
yeah. That's Oh, I love your thought process on that because it connects so great to what we've learned the last couple of weeks from Ashton. He mentioned, and we spent like 2 hours with him interviewing and asking all these questions. I don't know if we got it on camera, but he mentioned there's a difference between empathy and sympathy. And he described, and I'm sure it's a common analogy, but it was the first time I had heard it, that, sympathy is walking by someone that's fallen into a hole and acknowledging, oh yeah, wow, there's somebody fell into that hole. That sucks. And keep on walking, right? And empathy is walking by, seeing someone that has tripped and fallen into a hole and being like, okay, how do I help this person? Or getting down into the hole and saying, oh man, yeah, this really does suck. Let me see if I can help you, or experiencing that pain and that trouble with that person. And it's exactly what you're talking about, right? Like, we can go walk by an employee's desk or a teammate's desk and be like, oh, hey, how's it going? And just keep on walking and not care, not really listen. But empathy is like, okay, actually sitting down and like actually caring about what their answer is going to be. Yeah. Oh, I had a long day yesterday, dealing with, X, Y, and Z, or man, work is really stressing me out. I've got all these things on my plate. Like, actually caring about what that person says. Like, that is truly what empathy is. And even something as simple as doing that can help a bit and help your workplace have a better, more positive environment. And right. I love that you say that, because it just fits so well with what Ashton was talking about. And, you guys didn't talk before you got on the episode today. So it just shows how true something like that is.
You know what, Hayden, the other thing is that there's two things, is that a lot of times people don't necessarily need a reply. They just want somebody to listen, right? Because they could be the one that's carrying all the weight on their shoulders, whatever it's going through. And yet we are expected them to come here and be productive, right? The thing that we have to remember is people are walking in the door. There's regular, ordinary people are coming through your doors, sitting behind the desk, going in the field, hopping in the trucks, shoveling the sewage, whatever that job may be. They're regular people. It's the task that they do is making them the employee. And then we're asking them to show up at a customer's house and show empathy. But how can we as employers not show that same empathy back?
Right.
So it's an exact same thing. We want our employees to live in the world we're providing a service, but we have to make sure we're doing that right back to them.
I love it. That's awesome. I want to do a little scenario here, because I think this kind of leads right into our next kind of not next topic. It's all the same topic, but let's talk. So Derek, obviously he's a managing partner here at Spot On Solutions. Let's do kind of a scenario where an employee here at Spot On Solutions comes to Derek and says, oh, I am struggling with anxiety, or I am struggling with depression. What should Derek, as an employer, what are some things that he can do? Obviously, listening's one. You mentioned that like sometimes we just need somebody to listen to us, right? But what are some things, some active or proactive things that Derek could do to help better take care of that employee that's struggling?
This is great. I can't wait for this answer.
Yeah, we're gonna give Derek some real coaching right here.
All right.
So first of all, you want to make sure that what you're hearing is coming right from that employee, right? Because a lot of times you'll have different secondhand comments or different things from other employees. And if you hear that, my best advice on that is just go do a check-in with the employee, first of all, right? And so if you don't hear directly from that employee, do a check-in. Hey man, how's everything going? Your day, you're doing well, whatever it may be, right? Just do a check-in. And that could open the door for somebody just to say something, right? But if an employee comes to me and they're saying, you know what, I'm just struggling today, Marcie, this is going on, I'm having a problem, going back, Derek, the employer, it's like, I'm hearing you. So how can I help you? How can I best serve you as your employer, as Derek? How can I serve you in what you need? Where can I meet you? Right? Because that's the other thing is, as employers, we want to meet the people where they are too. We want to make sure that, hey, are you doing that? There's going to be times, depending on that person's just not having a great day. And you know what? Would it be best to, we're not going to put you out in the field today, right? If it's really struggling, we're just going to keep you in the office. Or do you need to talk some more? Do you just need to go home? Right? So we're going to talk about that. But then some of the other things that as employers that we can proactively do, and it's going to go right back to culture, right?
Yeah.
It is proactive. We have to be intentional every single day when we walk through the doors, how we show up. Are we smiling? Do we genuinely care? Are we creating a safe space? Are we being collaborative? Are we inviting other people to to give us some feedback, right? We always look at an org chart as you have this hierarchy, but sometimes you want to create that open, inviting atmosphere. As employers, it is our right, or not right, sorry, it's not that. It is our duty and responsibility to ensure that when somebody is walking in, they feel safe, that they can, whatever troubles they're experiencing the outside, they don't experience that inside. So when we're talking about what can we do to proactively is be intentional with what culture you are developing. And if it's not going to be that culture that's going to create somebody of feeling safe, then maybe we need to revisit, right? What are we standing by? What are our principles? What are our foundations that somebody can feel like, hey, you know what? I really enjoy working here because of this, or it's my respite. I think of several cases. A single mom story scenario comes in my head, right? She's struggling getting the kids off of work or whatever. 8 to 5 could be her break, right? Like she
Right.
gets a little bit of a respite, you're having a breath of fresh air, and you don't necessarily think about it like that, but that's absolutely how we have to look at what we're providing here. Not just somebody's giving us a doing our task, helping us complete our mission, but we're actually giving something back to them.
Yeah. I love
You
that.
know, I think I 100% agree with you on that, Marcie. And the word that keeps coming to my mind is trust, right?
Mhm.
I think there's got to be a certain level of trust between the employee and the employer. I mean, I think, my tendency is, once I'm aware of that there might be some kind of an issue, I go into like fix it mode, right? And I'm like, I gotta fix it, and I gotta help this person, right? But number one, they've got to be able to trust you enough to even talk to you about it in the first place. So much of the stuff that people deal with, they just keep bottled up inside of them, right? One of my favorite videos of all time is a YouTube video I saw that's called "It's Not About the Nail," right? And I have
Yeah,
to remind, have you ever seen that video
I have.
where, husband and wife are talking and she's got a big nail sticking out of her head and she just wants her husband to listen to her about all the problems she's having, but he knows what the problem is, he wants to fix it, and she doesn't want it to be fixed. She just wants him to listen. But until there's that trust, none of that opening up is going to even happen in the first place. Am I right?
Right. Yeah. And but when you're looking at, it's all about developing relationships, right? You're cultivating relationships where the last piece, I don't know about y'all, but when I look at relationships, I'm trusting at the last thing because I have to feel comfortable. I have to feel safe. I have to have respect. And then it's the trust part. And so when you're developing relationships, and the best way to do that to gain that trust is, again, it goes back to what I said at the beginning, is being you, showing up as you, showing that you genuinely care about what's going on and the person that's walking in your door, and not just the employee. And so in that entire process is building trust. So when they do sit in front of you and say, you know what, Derek, I'm just having a crappy day, this is what's going on, that's number one. Also a huge responsibility that I as an employer have now, I feel, because they're trusting me, and I'm going to honor that, and I'm going to take that. And then you're just going to say, okay, what's the expectation? What are things that I can do? Here are some options that I have, right? And so it just opens that door.
I love it. I think you've mentioned it multiple times, Marcie, and I want to just get really clear on it, because you said before we started really talking and recording on the podcast, one of the questions that I sent over to you yesterday that I thought would be good to discuss, you were like, I think one of the questions you asked, you answered it in the question, right? And you've mentioned it here multiple times, but I want to make sure our audience really gets it, is that these things of like, having a productive and high performing work environment and having a positive work environment that our employees feel comfortable about talking about their mental health and their struggles. They're not diametrically opposed, right? Like these two things can exist and should exist at the same time. And it's because of one that the other happens, right? Like you can have high performing, high productive employees in a very productive work environment because it's a positive and safe space for them. And I think safe space is kind of a buzzword that gets thrown around, especially in the political environment that we're in right now. That's not what we're talking about, right? That we've got to have this, people have to be coddled. Like that's not what you're saying, right? Like maybe kind of talk a little bit more about that, like the productive performance as well as the positive work environment. Like those two things can and should exist at the same time.
Absolutely. So, when you're talking positive and being productive in that, some of the things that first pop into mind is you're collaborating, right? You're bringing a team and you're collaborating. Everybody has good ideas, right? Everybody just has different viewpoints. And it's how can we bring all of that together and create a collaborative, positive work environment? Because, just be somebody over here has only worked for us for say less than a year, and then you have an estimator who's been with you for 10 plus years, doesn't mean that they're not going to have great ideas and to bring that together. So that's a positive. And when we're, safe space is definitely a buzzword, and but we're not talking, like you said, not talking about that. It is, how can somebody feel that it's okay to voice their opinion? Right? How can they come? Because that's that positive atmosphere. That is that collaborative and productive side. And, when there are statistics, and I can't quote them off the top of my head, but it's absolutely said, when you have a better positive environment, the productivity is going to go up. People want to perform more. They want to do. People take pride in their work. And when they have a better attitude, when they're happy and they feel good, it's going to go through the roof, and you're going to see that. So it's definitely, going back to that, investing your time into doing that.
I love it. There's so many pieces there that I think, we could spend whole entire conversations about, but yeah, going back to Derek's thought, like trust is a big one. Like your employees are never going to want to talk to you or work hard for you if they don't trust you and they don't think that you care about them. Like there's so many pieces there, but I love that it all kind of comes back to that, like you mentioned as well, relationships and everything there.
Well,
Derek,
let me just
go ahead.
add to that, Marcie, and maybe you could speak to this as well too. But I'm, as having been a business owner, having been an employer the better part of my life, and so I've sat in a chair from a perspective of, being the boss who didn't create the best positive work environment. And having to learn how to do that as well. I mean, because like we talk about this as this is what we need to do, but the execution of it takes effort, right? I mean, you said just be you, and I'm like, well, I know a lot of people that I don't want to be anything like, right? And I was like, so, I mean, especially like when you're trying to build a company, I mean, think about how many times I'm like, I just have my nose to the grindstone and I've got tunnel vision and I have, an objective and I got to get it done. And, I've had to, and I still am not perfect at this by any means, but I have to remember, I have to tell myself to like, stop, like to be the human that you're talking about. Right. And maybe that, to me, that's the struggle, is to be aware, to slow down enough, maybe to step back enough to, to be able to be that person that creates that environment. And because, I mean, it's not an easy thing. It does take effort, at least in my experience.
Absolutely. And effort is key. And that's, it's intentional. And the thing is, you know the type of company you want to create. right? You have these core values, this foundation of where you want to build, and it's probably not far from who you are, right? And so when you're looking at how are you going to relay that? How are you going to hire people that are going to have those same core values and foundation that you have? It is the intentionality every single day. If your product, you want it to be good and you want a good output, well, you have to invest in the people, the human element of the workforce, right? You have to make sure where they are today. Hey, I'm just doing a check-in. And again, we're talking about the mental health side of that. And so your grindstone, you as an owner, as you know, in this sector, not everybody has that mindset. I've never owned a company, and I have to remember, like, hey, I'm grinding, but they haven't, and so I need to do that check-in. And so you just have to remove yourself. And I'm going to go back to the golden rule, right? I kind of do unto others as you want somebody to do to you. And you may have been in an employer for so long, but remember what it was like when you were an employee. And kind of say, you know what, I wish my boss would have just done this, or I wish he would have asked me, or I wish that this would have happened here. And it's always just kind of looking at it from that other viewpoint and just doing it. It is a grind and it is an effort. And I'm not gonna deny and take away that it's not potentially just taxing, but if that's the word, taxing, not taxing, sorry. Scratch
I
that.
got you.
Anyway, but it's how do you want to show up? And I look at my servant, I'm a servant leader. That's how I view my leadership style. And that's what I want to give back, right? Is that I want to make sure that I'm serving and I'm giving of myself and showing up, because that's how the employees are gonna best receive. So
I love
I
it.
love that.
I want to kind of go back to this conversation, just a little bit like deeper. I think that's kind of the culture, Derek, to speak to what you kind of first mentioned there with this idea of like just grinding constantly and having to like pull your head up and like, okay, slow down. And like, how do I take care of myself and my team? That is I don't want to say anti, but it's opposed to this grind culture, or I don't know, but in business today, it feels like, every clip on social media, everything that you see on the internet is all about, you just got to work a little bit harder. You're not working hard enough. You've got to wake up earlier and stay later. And there's kind of these things here that are at times opposed to positive work environment, both for yourself and for the people around you. I mean, we've mostly been talking about like, how do we help our employees feel better in our work environment? But a lot of this relates to us as well, right? Like having a positive work environment is also good for me as an employer, or, Derek is an employer. Like Derek should be able to separate his work and home life. Derek should be able to slow down on certain days when he's having, a stressed out day. Like this isn't always just about how do we better help our employees be more productive and take care of their mental health. Like this is also about ourselves. And I think that there's so much culture and content out in the world today that is hustle, grind, you're not working hard enough, work harder, that I think that can almost be a detriment to your success. Like finding a balance is more important, in my opinion, to take it for what it's worth. But finding a balance is more important to being more of an effective employee and an employer, whatever it might be. I don't know. That's kind of my thought. Marcie, I don't know if I'm off on that, but that's kind of my thought process to it.
and I hear you. For me, and I'm looking in restoration.
Yeah.
We are a customer driven industry.
Yep.
We
Big time.
don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. That you get that call and everything can go out. And so for me in the work-life balance, it's work is life. And so how are you balancing that all together? And especially with what we do and how we show up. And so you enjoy the slow, you enjoy the low. And that's when you can really invest, because when we're gone and going and you have like hurricane season for us starts in a couple of weeks, and there could be the high potential that we're just rolling. So how am I investing in my employees now? and making sure they're good and they're ready. And it's in those slow and it's in the down times, right? So, because when we're high and we're needed to move them and they're not home for weeks at a time because we deployed somewhere or we have a large loss in our backyard, that they're working 7 days a week, 16-hour days, that's the time that I need to make sure that we're going up and down and that I'm checking in. And so, going back to your point also is, say, Derek as an owner, how does he deserve some time? Well, that's where the intentionality, and he is doing an ROI on himself, right? When you invest in your employees a little bit and giving of yourself and knowing, hey, they're good, he can come back and take, you know what? They're good. I know they're in the right mindset. They're doing exactly what they need. The projects are on point, and I'm okay to take a step back. I'm okay to do a vacation. And
Right.
so that's, it's all about intentionality and knowing, hey, tomorrow can change on a dime. So let me make sure I'm intentional today and never lose focus of where you are today.
I love it.
Great
That's
point.
that sounds like, yeah, you've described in my mind like the perfect way to do it. And I think that's how you have to operate. Again, I've quoted multiple things that Ashton kind of said the last couple of weeks, but he mentioned a comment that I thought was really, really insightful, especially coming from a mental health expert, someone that, works with people that have a lot of these issues on a day-to-day basis. He said, happiness is not the norm. Happiness is an exception to the norm. And so how can you find the best way to handle the tough times, right? The busy times, the crazy times, like finding a way to get through those times, and not necessarily having to find happiness everywhere, but find a way to have a positive experience or to get through those as best you can, so that you are then ready for the happiness and the fun times and the vacations and whatever it might be. Happiness is not the norm. And I think I don't want to confuse the two. Our conversation today, and we haven't in any way, shape, or form, but I want to make sure I just hit at this again, that creating a positive work environment and a safe space for your employees and for yourself does not mean that it needs to be hunky-dory and happiness all the time. Like we should come to work and we should work hard and be productive and get things done and help our clients or our customers. Like, doesn't need to necessarily mean you have to come to work and be, everything's perfect and happy all the time. Like, work can be stressful, and that's okay. Like that's going to be the norm at times, but finding a way to balance that in your life and deal with the highs and the lows and finding a good middle ground, can lead to actually more happiness, because you're not always caught up in the lows or the highs all the time. You live your life at a much more of a balanced level. And I thought that was really insightful.
Yeah. The word that pops into mind more than happiness is joyful. Like,
Yeah,
I'm joyful at work. There's, like, in anything that we do at home and at work, you're going to have things that are just frustrating, right? Like, there's going to be days that I'm just stressed, that I'm aggravated about something. But overall, I'm joyful with my job. Like, I truly have joy when I come in here, and it just fills me up. And there's days that I'm going to be happy and I'm going to be sad, in that, but I just have joy when I walk here or when I'm doing anything. And so that's the attitude, that's the spirit that I want people to have, is just to be joyful is when they're here. And so when I have an estimator who gets that estimate kicked back so many times, and it gets frustrating, but he's still joyful and he's still full of joy to walk in here every day. And so, happiness, I 100%, it's not a consistent, right? It's not there. You have to create that happiness. And it, in my thought and how I look at it, happiness is a byproduct of that intentionality. You can choose to be happy, you can choose to be miserable, you can choose to be joyful, you can choose to be just, slumpy, whatever the of joyful is, right? But that's a choice. And as employers, we have to do everything to cultivate that, right? We have to do everything to make that choice easier for them. They have to see that. We have to actually not even give them the choice. We have to show it. Hey, you know what? We are a positive environment that breeds collaboration, that breeds that teamwork atmosphere, and that we do, hey, when we're busy, and we expect everything from you. We're going to give it, but on that slow times, we're going to give it right back. So
right. I love it. Marcie,
Mar-
oh, go ahead, Derek.
It's interesting, Marcie, like, you have been, like you said, you've been in the human resources calling
Long.
for a
Yes.
long, long time, right? I would never believe it's been 20 years, but so you have the opportunity to really like sit across the desk, across the table, on a couch, whatever the scenario is, where an employee, a worker for the company, they come to you by and large in a lot of ways with their challenges, right? And because maybe you are by nature of the title of the designee of the fixer of challenges, right?
Yes.
So how do you you have an employee that comes, oftentimes they open their heart, they open their mind and their feelings to you. How do you deal with that? And then how do you act kind of as, in many ways, you're a liaison, right, between the employee and management, or the company and the culture? So how do you handle that?
I'm not going to tell you, everybody is always going to be different, right? And so the number one thing is that I listen. And the way that I also, going back, it is a big deal if somebody is going to come in my door, sit in front of me and tell me that, and I'm going to take that responsibility very seriously. I look at anybody who has that, overcomes that, because it has to give them some anxiety, right? That I'm just about to tell Marcie everything that's going on. There has to be a level of kind of, okay, can I do that? So I'm going, that's an honor to me when somebody can sit in front of me, and I'm going to hold that very dear and near. But first and foremost, I listen. I listen to what they have to say. I listen to all of that. And sometimes they don't want advice. Sometimes they just say, hey, what are some resources that you can give me? Let's talk it through. I need to help. Let me bounce some things off of you. And I do that very, I'm not unbiased, right? I don't form an opinion of the person. I don't form an opinion of the situation. And I think that's going back to the trust part, is that's where everybody, they know that they can trust me, because I'm not going to judge them. Right. And I'm not going to judge the situation. And I think that is key overall, is that I don't necessarily know, going to answer or question how to necessarily, because every case is going to be different, but it's approaching it non-judgmental. Don't throw your opinions on them, because they're not there for your opinion. They do want, kind of just talking it through, and just an unbiased ear to listen. But like I said, there's always going to be tons of resources, and depending what it is. And I mean, I can give you different scenarios, but it's always just going to be coming in, and don't judge them, because they're still going to have to work for you, right? And it's still looking at, hey, they're walking in the door and they're unloading their problems, and they're going to have to still see me tomorrow, knowing that I'm not going to view them differently. The other thing is that I'm very protective of the information given to me. And so if someone's coming in, I don't necessarily tell their direct manager. I don't necessarily tell anybody. It's a need to know basis if it is. And that's, I also make very clear that if you come in here, it's going to stay here unless the information you tell me needs to move up the channel, unless it's warranted. And there are certain circumstances where that does occur, right? But that they know that it's going to stay with me unless needed. And so, the other thing I tell employees, this kind of I tell them in all orientation. I don't know about y'all, but my grandma, I went to her house and it was like this just oasis. Everything was great. There was unicorns and puppy dogs everywhere at my grandmother's house, right? And I would go and just feel like I could just relax. I tell everybody, I said, there's going to be times where you just get so frustrated and pent up with anger or whatever it may be, and you want to lash out at an employee or you want to yell at somebody on the phone. Come in here, get it all out, close the door, think this is grandma's house, and then you can go out and feel better. So I also give people that option. Like, if you just want to come unload, come in here, close the door, I'll scream, whatever. I'm not going to judge. And then you move on. And I think sometimes we also have to give permission to the employees and say, hey, this is an outlet because I go through that. And it's also being trans. I have moments where I need to like scream because something's frustrating me. Here's your outlet. Take it, and it's just giving permission and letting people know I'm real too. So I understand what you may be going through.
Right. I love that. Well, and what you just said there is super powerful, not just from the perspective of you sitting in the chair that you sit in for the responsibility you have with, like with Guarantee, but a lot of our listeners, a lot of people in this industry don't have the luxury or the resources to have a Marcie Richardson, right? The owner oftentimes is the HR director at the same time. Yeah. And so what you just said though is super powerful in the realm of, especially from an owner who has to be the HR person, who's doing the hiring, that is great advice for them as well too, that they need to, that one could definitely benefit from when it comes to dealing with these types of issues. Thank you. That's really cool.
I love it. Marcie, thank you. Yeah, you hit, without even me having to ask, Derek was on it. You hit it kind of that last piece of this, which is there's so many hats that a small business owner has to wear. And providing a place for your employees to something as simple as just venting, right? Like I love the idea that like you having a place that like your employees can come in and scream and yell and, oh, this customer did this today, or this person, this person did this in the van or whatever. Like you can just come in and vent and be frustrated and have kind of that mental health break. And then you can leave it in that room and you can go out and take it. Like that's a great nugget of advice for those small business owners that might only have 4 or 5 employees, and they're the business owner, the general manager, the HR director, they're all of the above. And so that's a great little piece of advice there. So, Marcie, thank you so much for coming on today. There's a lot of really good information that you provided and some really great advice, I think, for small business owners, as well as, individuals that are struggling with mental health in the workplace and how can they have this positive environment. And so I know there's going to be a lot of really awesome value that our audience is going to get out of that. And I think I would be remiss if I didn't close today's episode. You're a new guest on the Success Elevated podcast, so I want to make sure we ask you kind of our 3 final rapid fire questions, if you will, that we ask every guest before they leave. So first question, favorite book or podcast that you're reading or listening to right now that you've really enjoyed?
So I'm a big, I'm reading, John Maxwell came out with a new book, The 16 Undeniable Laws of Communication, which is fantastic. So that came out a couple of months ago. So almost finished with that. And then a podcast, I'm a big Patrick Lencioni fan. And so I listen to him and his Table Group podcast often. That's always on my weekly rotation.
Love it. Anything John Maxwell, I'm in. So that sounds, I didn't even know he'd come out with something new. So that's great. That's a great recommendation.
I've got it sitting here.
Do you have it, Derek? You got it on your desk?
Yeah, right. It's awesome.
I might have to bug Derek and borrow it from him.
Sorry, you're not going to get it.
Second question. I know you've obviously director of HR for a large restoration company. I'm sure your days are very hectic and very busy and can be stressful at times. You've got hurricane season coming up. How do you relax at the end of a long, stressful day? How do you recharge your mental, emotional batteries?
His name's Tito.
Tito.
No, I'm kidding.
Tito's and soda. No, there you go.
Not too much kidding. No, I mean, in Louisiana South, the weather is always nice. And so most of the time I'm just sitting outside, just relaxing, just taking a kind of a debrief on myself, the day. And I just unwind that way. So
that's great. That's generally mine as well. Go home, relax for a little bit, and then get outside in some aspect. So that's a great way to do it. Last question. you've been doing this HR thing for a little while now, both in the restoration industry and without. If you could rewind and tell your younger self one thing, you tell younger Marcie one thing about your career or just life in general, what would be the one thing that you would tell your younger self?
Be you from jump. That given a little tidbit, and I don't want to go down this road, but being a woman, you always feel like you have to measure up to a man.
Yeah.
And when I finally hit the last 5 years, I realized I don't need to do that. And I wasted a lot of time, a lot of effort, sacrificed a lot of potential in me. If I would have just, from day one, show up as me and not try to be anyone else.
I think that's
Awesome.
great advice for everybody, Marcie. I think that's awesome. Thank you. Like I said before, this has been an awesome episode. Part 3 of our mental health awareness series. This has been a ton. You're a wealth of great information, Marcie. And so we're going to be sending people your way probably both on LinkedIn and Facebook. We'll make sure to tag you in all of our posts, but you're a wealth of information. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. And I hope to have you on in the future. Maybe we can talk about more things HR, or maybe talk about the craziness of hurricane season in Baton Rouge. So we'd love to hear about all that. But again, just thank you for coming on the show.
It was my pleasure. I appreciate it. I'm going to hold you to that.
Okay, deal. Let's do it.
We will always have something to talk about, Marcie. So
Derek, that is fact. Absolutely.
We can definitely glean from all of your wonderful knowledge. Besides that, we can have a good time doing it too. So
absolutely.
Awesome.
Thanks, Marcie. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks, guys.
This has been Success Elevated, making you a little bit better one show at a time. Thanks for joining us. Please subscribe on YouTube or any other major podcast platform to listen to more episodes. We are proudly brought to you by Spot On Solutions. If you'd like to learn more about how we can help you grow your business, please check us out at spotonsolutions.com.